Welcome to today's webinar, After Magnifica Humanitas, How Catholics Can Shape AI for Human Flourishing. While we wait a few moments for everyone to join, I have a few quick updates regarding today's session. To ensure the best audio quality, all participants are muted. However, we welcome your questions. Please submit them at any time using the Q&A feature located on your toolbar. For optimal viewing experience, we recommend switching to gallery view using the view options in the top right corner of your screen. Finally, when the webinar concludes, a brief survey will automatically open in your browser. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. With that, let's welcome today's moderator, Dr. Roberto Dandy, Catholic University, International University's Interim Provost and Chair of the Business and Ecclesial Management Program. Welcome, Dr. Dandy.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. And welcome to this webinar about After Magnifica Humanitas. And my name is Roberto Dandy, and I will be moderating this event. As you know, just over a month ago, Pope Leo gave the Church its first encyclical on artificial intelligence, Magnifica Humanitas. He opened with a stark image. Humanity today stands before a choice to build a new Tower of Babel or to build a city where God and humanity dwell together. He proposed another image, the story of the prophet Nehemiah standing before Jerusalem's ruined walls, gathering discouraged people to rebuild brick by brick together. So that's the positive model that we need to consider as an inspiration. And this is the spirit of this webinar. So the Pope has given us the discernment, the questions, and now we want to understand how do we as Catholics, as builders, researchers, educators, clinicians, engineers, actually pick up the bricks. How do we make sure that AI shaping our society and daily life is built to serve the human person rather than subject them to the mentality of power, as the encyclica puts it. So today's conversation is an attempt to exactly to respond this. And I'm honored to introduce four experts already doing this job, this work of answering these questions. So the first is Matthew Sanders, the founder of and CEO of Lombard, the company behind Magisterium AI, a leading AI answer engine for the Catholic faith, reaching people in over 165 countries. So, small clarification before anyone gets confused. The CEO of Longbird is not the guy with the long bird, but Matthew Sanders. And then Dr. Michael Pensina, the chief AI scientist at United Health Group and co-founder of the Coalition for Health AI. He spent years building Duke's national leadership in trustworthy health AI, and he is now part of the board of trustees in our university, Catholic International University, and also a faculty in our program on prudential design of emerging technologies. Taylor Black, venture architect for over 20 years, launching and scaling ventures across different ecosystems. He directs AI and venture ecosystems within Microsoft Office of the CTO and serves as the inaugural director of the Leonium Institutes of AI and Emerging Technologies. And finally, eventually, last but not least, Dr. William Hudson, the chair of the Department of Emerging Technologies at Catholic International University, where he directs the programs in prudential design of AI. He's a retired engineering executive who spent his career building AI-enabled healthcare products. So welcome, you all, and thank you for being here. We have a rich panel with different points of view. So healthcare, big tech, engineering, so that we can answer these questions from different angles. So let's begin with my first question. In the third chapter of Magnifica Humanitas, Pope Leo writes plainly that technology is never neutral. So he warns against what he calls an anthropological regression, a world where efficiency replaces relationships, where our God-given capacity for love and connection gets quietly optimized away. So, but he's also clear that AI is not inherently evil. So there are many advantages coming from these technologies. So the real choice before us is between a progress that serves people and one that subjects them to what he calls the mentality of power. So William, let's start from you. You've thought deeply about AI through the categories of the scholastic anthropology for your programs on prudential design. So from this advantage point, what do you see are the opportunities and dangers of AI?
Thank you, Roberto. I'd like to begin with the dangers, but first I'd like to point back to something that I found interesting. Pope Francis, in his Laudate Si, has a quote from Romano Guardini back in the 60s where he says, contemporary man has not been trained to use technology well. And I thought this was fascinating because it bears on our education system of how are we training our engineers and our product owners in these technologies. The dangers, I would say, are pretty immense at this point because of the accelerative capacity of AI. We've gotten used to other forms of augmentation of human capacities, but AI is moving to something near and dear to us, which is our intellect. The dangers are pretty obvious at this point, and it sits within a context of issues having to do with technology that are problematic to begin with. And I'll simply say that if we thought that technology was going to make us happy, we ought to be pretty clear now that it hasn't made us happy. It doesn't make us happy. Easy does not make us happy. And more than just the users of this technology, the developers themselves, the individual workers, the engineers, the testers, and so forth, the executives that are pushing this technology, they're not happy either. And the evidence is accumulating, not just from the mental health area in terms of loneliness and lack of meaning and so forth. It's now coming clear that from the sort of neuroscientific basis, there are certain biological and neuronal indicators that people are not happy to the extent that you can determine happiness from these biological indicators. And it has to do with a number of different things. We've lost track of what our freedom is for. And so I think this is a danger. If we don't understand what freedom is for and why we have freedom, it's easy to lose that freedom. Another danger has to do with what I might say sort of synoptically, the fragmentation within the human is becoming more and more pronounced. The different distance between our intellect, our will, our passions, and what our body is doing, what we desire, and so forth, is being fragmented. We know our attention span is fragmented. We can't hold our attention. People are complaining they don't read anymore. They can't read for very long anymore. And there's other sorts of fragmentation. The biologists are pointing to what's going on between the hemispheres. There's language having to do with the left hemisphere dominance, which there should be a balance between what our left hemisphere is doing and what our right hemisphere is doing. So that's another form of fragmentation or dysfunction. There's fragmentation going on between people in terms of our relationality. We were meant to be we were meant for another. We were meant for God, and we were also meant for our spouse and our family and so forth. And this fracture or fragmentation in our relationality is significant, and the church has taught about this. So that's, I would say, in a nutshell, some of the aspects of our dangers. I don't want to walk on anyone else's parts. I would say the opportunities are really marvelous. We can renew people's understanding of what the human is for. We have to kind of inject a more transcendent view of what the human is for, what it was made for, that we were created by God to love. It's a beautiful, magnificent view, and I was so happy to see the Pope's title emphasizing an elevation of our humanity. The university has a key role here. We have to re-inject an understanding of freedom, that freedom exists for excellence, it exists for growth, it exists for love. And this is, I think, an attractive idea that the Catholic universities can really help inject into the population, the individual engineers that are receiving their education in universities. It would renew people's understanding of what they were for, why did they go to work, and this should boost our spirit, if you will. It has to, if we understand that we were made for great things. So I'll pause there, Roberto. I hope I haven't run over anybody's time.
Thank you, Bill. And Matthew, you're literally building AI for, I don't know, billions of Catholics every day. You're probably among the first to see both the promise and the risks up close. What do you see?
I see more promise than perils, I think. But I'm very fortunate. I mean, the kind of AI that we're building, it's not exactly as many use cases as general purpose AI. But there are risks in Catholic AI as there are in any other. I think most of the risk would be pretty obvious to people that are listening. I mean, the same way that people can become attached to secular AI, they can become attached to Catholic AI in an unhealthy way. I think it's a little bit harder, at least for the product we designed, because it's not that emotive or interesting. It's more like a librarian. Not to say librarians aren't interesting, but it's not someone you want to kind of chat with and I think build a long-term relationship with anyway. There's also risks. I mean, you still have to be vigilant. You have to know how to frame your question the right way. I mean, at the end of the day, the AI is going and doing research and pulling sources. But if you don't ask the right questions, that can end up leading the AI to go and retrieve the wrong context. And so it may not be the right context for you. I'm not saying that necessarily will lead you astray, but it might be frustrating. And I think there's also this risk that people will start to see that getting answers from AI is ultimately just easier, and there's less friction than going and seeking to get an answer from a priest or a family member or a mentor or something like that. And I think that ultimately is not a good thing because the heart-to-heart still matters, and the machine may be able to give you a good answer, and that answer may have come from a pope or a saint, but most of the people you'd be talking with are long dead and can't care about you in the same way that people who are still on earth can. So I think it's always important to remember that. And sometimes the answer is not so much as important as knowing that the person cares about you and has a very vested and real interest and seeing you succeed. So I think it's always important to keep that in mind and ask yourself really the more important question is why are you talking to an AI and not to a human being? I think that's just always something we should ask ourselves.
Thank you. Dr. Penzina, you are in healthcare where the stakes are high, bodies, life, death. And so from where you sit, what are the greatest opportunities and dangers of AI?
Right. So definitely the stakes are high in healthcare, maybe the highest of all industries because it touches on our lives and our health. I think what I really liked about the encyclical is the Holy Father calling for our engagement with the new technology. I will say in different discussions in different circles, what I've noticed that there is a group of people that basically AI is everything, and I see it even within my family, right? My 17-year-old son was dancing for joy that anthropic fable model was brought back because he was using it for his coding. And then my wife is very skeptical of, for example, use for AI in chatbots, right? Extremely frustrated. She calls an institution and she's talking to AI and she absolutely hates it and is very distrustful, right? So even the family level, but so there is a percentage of people who want to push AI and AI does everything, and there is the skeptical large public. I will say in recent months, that's shifting in the sense that pretty much everybody is recognizing that the technology is coming in and revolutionize our lives as we know it, right? So again, the Holy Father, I think, read it extremely well. Trying to hide our heads in the sand and pretend that, well, it's just a wave, a revolution, we can wait it out, is not going to happen. We need to jump in and try to influence what we can to the extent we can. I also want to be very honest and pragmatic that we don't have full control of what is happening, right? It's so in my role, I'm not a CEO, right? I think Matthew can do a lot and decide what he's doing. Most of us are working as part of larger organizations that's dictating the shifts that are ongoing. And the question becomes, how do we influence it? I think the opportunity is huge, is real, and is positive. Right? Examples that I like to use, the use of AI for imaging, for example, reading mammograms. I have family examples, right? My aunt diagnosed with breast cancer in advanced stage between mammograms. The question in my head is, if we had AI technology, would it have been picked up earlier, right? Which is really important for cancer prevention. My wife having to go through procedures to rule out cancer again after mammography. And when I ask a human expert, one of the best expert we have at Duke, like based on the readings, what do you see? What's the probability that what she has might be malignant? She said, well, it's between 2 and 99%. Right. And fortunately, we had other procedures and it was ruled out. But between 2 and 99% is not the precision that anybody wants and can live with, right? And AI can absolutely help. AI can also help streamline healthcare delivery. Prior authorization, it's a sensitive area between healthcare organizations, hospitals, clinics, and insurance payers, right? And can we use AI for this back office work, which I, as a patient, see it as a nuisance, really, right? And in the process, to really automate and streamline granting prior authorization with the use of AI, right? Reading the documents and so on and so forth. So I think the opportunities are tremendous. So it's I definitely see it, and I'm working on some of these algorithms, right, to use AI for good. On the other hand, the dangers are very real as well. And especially the last few months with the agentic revolution, this is a real danger, right? I like to use this analogy when I ask or I use the phrase trustworthy social media. What comes to mind? What comes to my mind? Well, it's an oxymoron, right? Nobody views social media as trustworthy, and we have a lot of examples. And it did some good, especially during the pandemic connections, right? I could talk to my parents overseas because we had the technology, but what it did to the young generation, right, and what it's still doing, I think there are multiple adverse impacts. And I worry that with agentic AI, which many claim is even more powerful and influential than the social media revolution has been, there are also a lot of dangers, right? It's the personification of these agents and ceding human agency to agents, to machines, right? They are called agents on purpose because they have agency. They can reason on our behalf, right? It can answer my emails for me, which I'm not using it for that reason because I'm very uncomfortable. Now, I can put them together to do good work on imaging detection or automated granting prioritization and so on and so forth. So that gets us to the theme or the topic of the application. And I think that's where our human agency stays and is extremely important.
Thank you so much.
We're still able to decide where we're applying the technology. I don't know how many years we have of that human right. I hope we don't lose it where agents will decide where agents are created, right? And we start seeing that already. So I think this is the call, and the encyclical, I think, is a great foundation on which to build. But it is the decision making of where we bring in AI and how we bring it in that we need to spend a lot of attention.
Thank you, Dr. Pensina. And Mr. Black, maybe you have the answer how many years we have left as a human species without AI ruling. And because you sit inside Microsoft, one of the labs literally defining this technology globally. But also you think as a philosopher and a theologian, so you are a mix of both worlds. So how do you see this balance between opportunities and risks?
Yeah, certainly. I think I lean on the side of optimism here, my own self. And part of the reason for that ends up being kind of my venture building background. There's not much of a business model in AI taking over the world and us not being able to pay for it, just purely on the pragmatic level, right? I think too that we underestimate how much both the social media revolution and its impacts, the cell phone revolution and its impacts, and the impacts of the pandemic had on those building technology. I know in the news headlines we often hear about some of the large frontier model firms, but in reality the frontier model firms are composed of people like you and I who are building and have kids and have work in educational systems and have seen the impacts of this technology on ourselves and don't let our children use cell phones and probably are off of social media and have seen these ramifications over time. And so while I don't want to paint an overly rosy picture of it's going to be okay and we don't have to do anything, I do think we have a tremendous amount of lean in and allies in all of the technology companies who are trying to seek out a better understanding of the human person so that they can build towards that understanding of the human person rather than a thinner or a more impoverished version. Part of the reason for that is inherent to the product making, I think, itself, where if you're building a product, pre-AI, it was a deterministic product. You could test out all the possible scenarios that your customer would have with regard to interacting with your product, and plan for those. With AI, we entered the era of kind of probabilistic product making, which means that I can't possibly account for all of the ways in which my customer is going to co-create their experience with what we have shipped, whether that's a generative AI product, whether that's an agentic product, or what have you. This probabilistic product layer has led to a really interesting problem in user research, and kind of design thinking, where we don't know what's happening inside the person's head when they are working with this thing and expecting a certain kind of outcome. There's ways in which we can kind of get at it a little bit by observing, by asking them questions afterwards, but it really doesn't touch on how that person is operating as they are thinking through the problem in coordination with this tool. Because, of course, as we as Catholics know, there's a whole lot more that is happening inside the person than just a computer or a computerized like logic system. And it's there that I think we have a tremendous amount to offer tech, a tremendous amount that tech is looking to us for, of articulating, no, this is how emotions work. This is how your beliefs work. This is how we understand the operations of the human intellect to work. And all of that goes directly into shaping a better product for the human person. And the technologists have an interest in this as well, because they don't want to ship the next version of Facebook that caused so much social harm that they're already aware of, that their own companies have studies on. They don't want to ship the next version of the cell phone that follows them, providing work in their pocket 24/7. It's those sorts of things that I think we can all come together as a human species, as a culture, and say there's a better way of doing this. Remember during the pandemic when you got to have lunch with your 3-year-old every day during the working week? Wasn't that great? Don't you want to get back a little bit more to an understanding of work, an understanding of the human person that incorporates that kind of communion, that kind of relationality? And how come we can't build that instead of the next monolithic paradigm, with all of us just talking to machines? Roberto, I think you might be muted.
So just I want to ask you, now it's the second round of discussion. So the encyclica calls us, the Catholics, to be artisans of hope. So to help build these technologies rather than avoid them or use it without reason. So what concrete actions we as educators, entrepreneurs, technologists may take in response to Magnifica Humanitas? So I would like to invite you to share what you're already doing in your own work, including your examples, initiatives, best practices. So I will start with Matthew. So you're probably a good example of this call of building brick by brick. So what are you actually doing at Longbird right now, and what you have learned, including from what didn't work? So what is your experience?
It definitely day to day feels like laying one brick on top of another. That's for sure. So what have we learned? Well, I think that some problems are harder than solved than others. That's definitely something that I've learned, but doesn't mean it's not worth making a run at. It's not worth trying. I think it's always important to take stock and say, what are the real problems that are still plaguing humanity? Like, what are the major impediments to human flourishing that are holding us back? I mean, humanity is better in many ways, almost every metric that we have been in our history. And yet we all know there's still some real improvement that's necessary. So what's holding us back? What are those problems? And I think what's kind of cool about AI and in this new AI and robotics age is these tools are more powerful than we've ever had in the past, and we can point them at some of the biggest, hairiest problems that have ever existed, and we might actually be able to tackle them in our lifetime. That to me is really exciting. The one that that we decided to take on was we felt specifically with the robotics age, as more people will probably have more time on their hands. How can we ensure people know how to constructively use that time, and don't just spend it doom scrolling? And one of the ways we felt that we could help accelerate human flourishing in this new age is to ensure that everybody has access to the wisdom and insight, the truth, the beauty of the Catholic faith, much of which is not accessible to people because they don't have the right models, or the priest isn't available, or some of the great works haven't been translated into their native language. So if we could find a way to basically digitize everything the church has ever said, and then make that universally accessible to everyone in the world on basically any device in their native language, therefore ensuring that the wisdom of the popes and the saints, the doctors and fathers of the church could be brought to bear when people have the big questions, or are suffering in some way, that might help us to overcome some of the challenges of the AI and robotics age. And it's been amazing for me to see just in the last really year how far the tools have come, and how this problem really feels like we're on the verge of solving it, which is remarkable when you think about it. I mean, and I always use this example, but if St. Paul was around today, and we told him that, yeah, everything the popes have said, everything that Jesus said, all that stuff, anybody in the world can access it basically. All they have to do is ask. His mind would explode. And I think we have to appreciate that. That's remarkable. So if we fail in our evangelization mission, there is nobody to blame but us. And that's why we're trying to do our bit.
Thank you, Matthew. Mr. Black, so you are at Microsoft, but also you are president of the Catholic Digital Commons Foundation. So can you tell us a little bit more about this and how this relates to AI?
Yeah, certainly. So the Digital Commons Foundation is a little infant organization that we see as becoming kind of an open source locus for the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church writ large. That means all of us as Catholics, right? All 1.4 billion of us. And part of the reason for this open source foundation is that we see the need for a translational layer from things like the incredible encyclical the Pope just wrote, to I'm a dev at a Fortune 500 company sitting behind my keyboard. What do I do now? I've just read this encyclical. How does that translate into the design decisions that I'm making? And how can I talk with other devs who are sitting behind their keyboards with exactly the same question on their minds? And how do we work through this in concrete ways of driving down this theory into actual lived practice? And so we're a few months old. We have maybe 1,500 members and participants. And we're trying to have this conversation in an open sort of way, and in an explanatory sort of way too, because rather than kind of coming down like Moses from the Mount Sinai with 10 commandments of this is how Catholics should operate on the basis of this encyclical, the reality is that doesn't exist, right? We have to kind of hammer out what that means in terms of design principles, in terms of how we integrate AI into the applications that we're building, into the how we think about the architecture of an API, how we think about the full stack build out of integrating AI into a parish, into a diocese, into a nonprofit. How do we think about the data questions and the privacy questions through a Catholic lens, not just a best practices from a secular world sort of lens? Now, there's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap, of course, between the way in which the secular world looks at security, looks at privacy, of course, and we're going to be integrating that as well and having those weave into our conversations. But as Magnifica Humanitas shows us, there's something about believing the Catholic anthropology that should change the way in which you build things, that should change the way in which you think through these further pertinent questions. And being able to do that in the open with a community of practice is something that we saw a need for as devs, as fellow Catholics kind of bumping around in this tech world and asking similar questions of each other, like how are you going about doing this? And so we hope this is a place where that conversation can grow and flourish in all the ways that open source has benefited the technological community since its inception decades ago. And we hope that folks come and share their insights, share what they're building, so that we can all learn a little bit faster from each other's mistakes as we try to implement this theory into practice.
Great, thank you. And Bill, Magnifica Humanitas mentions directly the prudence that we need in the design of these new technologies. And before Magnifica Humanitas, you worked a lot on this concept, prudential design of emerging technologies. So can you tell us a little bit more about this, because this is the core of your programs at Catholic International University, and how this prudential design is distinct from the secular design?
Thank you. When we began this program, we decided to focus on the person side of this and less on the technology side. And from a Catholic perspective, especially from a sort of Thomistic perspective, you cannot think about the person without also thinking about the interior virtues and the interior goods that God wants us to develop. And so we decided to focus this around prudence, the great charioteer of the virtues, as the church teaches us. And so we decided to focus on that side of it and not trying to provide the latest in technology. We'll never be able to keep, in our capacity, we'll never be able to keep up with the technology. So let's go back and focus on how a human should work, how a human should behave, how should they decide things and grow and so forth. And so we've injected into our program Thomistic anthropology. We go kind of down into the weeds, all the way back to St. Thomas. Our students read St. Thomas. They try to understand what is the will, what is the intellect, what are our passions, what are these appetites we have, and so forth. And so we've decided to inject that, and it's done without fragmenting the university. We have everything sort of self-contained in our program. So our product folks come in and they take anthropology. They don't go off to a separate philosophy department and get an ethics course that doesn't have any bearing on technology. So our AI ethics course is all focused around case studies in technology. So everything is trying to reinforce this idea that technology should be sort of integrated in with our other virtues. We're also focusing on something Taylor mentioned earlier about sort of our user research and the design criteria. Our view is that a lot of the designs we have out there in the world are quite good. They've got very good design properties to them, but our perspective is they're insufficient, that more is needed. The criteria that are used to evaluate a product's usability or its use are very materialistic. They don't reflect the interior goods that a person that could be at risk of losing if it's not done well. So we try to focus on enlarging an engineer's understanding of what good design really is. We're also focused on business design, that the business model of many companies is what drives most of our product design. So we want students to understand why a business model exists, how to think about it, and what might be the ethical consequences if this model goes out. What is it going to drive in the design itself? That an engineer may not want to do this, but it's what the company needs in order to make money. So we try to go all the way back to the business model so our product people who are going through our course can understand how things come about in a product. So our program is integrated. We're trying to sort of unfragment the university. We're focused on the virtues. One aspect of our anthropology course talks about John Paul II's writing on the theology of work. What is work for? Because I think a lot of humans have a misunderstanding about work, that work is somehow a curse, that we should minimize work. God's understanding, of course, is that work develops us. and the work makes us better. It enlarges our capacities, and that's when we become happier, when we possess these interior goods that St. Thomas Aquinas spoke about. So we're trying to rehabilitate some thinking around these interior goods, freedom, our virtues, the purpose of work, and again, in a design context, so that these engineers and product people can go out and work from within. We don't think that that this can be done, if you will, from Rome or from outside. It has to be embedded in a product engineer's mindset of how to develop better products that cause us to flourish. That's it.
Thank you, Bill. And Dr. Pensina, so you have co-founded and you co-lead the Coalition for Health AI, a multi-stakeholder effort to increase the trustworthiness of AI in the healthcare sector. So can you tell us about this effort and to what extent is in line with the Catholic tradition or Magnifica Humanitas considerations?
Right. So I think I want to build on what Bill was saying, how the transformation needs to happen within. And the encyclical talks about subsidiarity, right? The concepts of subsidiarity kind of emerges at the time of Reverend Novarum and kind of builds Catholic social teaching. And I strongly believe that subsidiarity holds the key to helping us onboard AI, so to speak, in a way that preserves what we want to preserve. And what I mean by that, it's pushing responsibility to the lowest level that can handle it, right? So I think what Bill is saying and the certificate, the program we have is accomplishing it, because we want builders of AI to be empowered and full of the virtues, right, of the Catholic tradition or even beyond. I feel much better. I think Taylor is talking about, right, that the people who are building have families, have children, kind of are also understand the youth perspective, and embedding and training or kind of making sure that the virtues and knowledge is there is absolutely necessary. And so I think that's why the Catholic International program is such a timely offering in this era of AI, and I think is a response that was built even prior, right, to what the Holy Father is calling for in the encyclical. So I think that's the kind of within aspect of subsidiarity. The other aspect, I think it's where I see organizations like Coalition for Health AI can play, as well as local governance bodies at different organizations, right? Whether it's healthcare companies or hospitals and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of guardrails or taming the AI beast from without, right? Bill talks from within, person, this is from without. So this is the kind of external framework in which the technology operates. It cannot be free for all, implement anything you want. You need to have standards, right? And the standards depend on the complexity and the application. We are not allowing drugs or devices to be put on the market unless they go a fairly rigid process of clinical trials, clinical research, right? Some AI applications need to go through a similar process. Others don't, right? There is a spectrum, obviously, but we need to register at the very least and know what AI is being deployed for a given healthcare organization, and have appropriate governance bodies with humans on top, right? Not just in the loop, making the right decisions. And the purpose of Coalition for Health AI is to create these national standards, right? It's not to govern again, centrally, one national or international body, that's not going to work. Central organization will not know what governance in Duke University Health System knows, right? About their patients, about their application, about the workflow, about the nature of the work. So that's why it's so critical that we push the governance to the most local level, but we have central, national, or international standards, so we don't, it doesn't get fully fragmented and chaotic.
That's consistent with subsidiarity as well.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. So before asking the last question, I wanted to share the questions from the participants. So first question is from Joao Matos. As younger generations become increasingly engaged with technology, I believe formation should begin as early as possible. At what grade level should Catholic schools start teaching students about both the opportunity and risks of emerging technologies like AI? How can they best prepare children to use these technologies wisely, ethically, and in a way that is rooted in the Catholic faith? So who wants to answer this?
I'll start. I would flip it around and focus on the child themselves. Is he or she able to do they have good impulse control? Are the virtues being developed in the child using other things before they even get to AI? If you see evidence that a child has composure and moderation, is learning the virtues, not needing answers right away, they have patience, they are service oriented, they're focused on others, they're not tending to just focus on themselves. If there are signs that the virtues are becoming firm in that child, then you could perhaps experiment with some technologies to see how well they handle it. But I would sort of not run from it, as somebody else said earlier today, but I would go in as a parent very cautiously and focus entirely really on the development of the virtues, so that the on-ramp to technology will be reasonable and kind of predictable, because the child has already shown that they can govern themselves using the virtues before they get their hands on something that could be very dangerous. So that's my answer.
Okay. Anyone else, or I would move on to the other one? Anonymous attendee says, in Catholic education, the challenges of AI are related to its intellectual use. Would the panelists please answer the effects of using AI to limit intellectual growth and rather an increase of laziness in being thinking persons? A true learner does not need to depend on Googling the answer or using AI to generate an answer. That's a pressing issue for universities as well.
Well, I would say, sort of in a similar sense, for an adult, we have to examine ourselves anyway during the day. We should examine ourselves. How is my behavior, and how have I responded to things today? And we should examine our use of AI. Am I becoming more dependent on AI? Are my prompts becoming sort of blunt or lazy, or are they becoming sharper and clearer? Does AI help me improve my understanding of something? Does it sharpen the distinctions between things? So I think we could use AI to become sharper, and we have to remain as an individual. It's our responsibility. We can't relegate this responsibility to a tool or some algorithm. We own the responsibility for our use of technology, and so we have to increase our vigilance and start asking ourselves demanding questions. How is my use of AI? Just the same way we approach the phone. Am I becoming dependent on the phone? If I leave the phone at home, do I get itchy? And the other sorts of reasonable, prudent kind of questions.
Yeah, and I think it can be more nuanced than a lot of us give it credit for. For example, like, Google kind of gave us the phrase that we can just look it up. We don't have to memorize it. Well, and while that's certainly true for certain kinds of things, perhaps the population number of a city or something like that, I think there's something tremendous that's lost if you don't have like poetry or your favorite quotes memorized, because not only does your interior life kind of diminish as a result of not having that great poet's way of phrasing something, comes unbidden to mind when you experience something that is related to that sort of feeling or that observation of a experience or phenomenon. But also, it makes it so that it's harder for you to actually come to insights because you're missing the requisite kind of substrate over which that provides the material for the insight to happen. In a similar way, there's kind of a concern about lending, however subtle it might be, letting one kind of trend towards, well, I don't need to meet up with my friend for coffee because I was able to ask the question that I was going to ask my friend of the artificial intelligence tool that I'm using. Note it gives you one less brick in the wall of trying to meet up, in the bridge, I should say, of trying to meet up with that friend, and kind of trends you towards less relationship as a result. Now, I mean, you can become overly scrupulous with this with regard to anything, of course, but I think those subtle kind of secondary effects of this technology on your own cognition, on your own building of relationships with other humans, ends up being tremendously important, and thereby even more important for any your own children, any students that you're forming, because any other kind of vulnerable population, shall we call them, in your life as a result of those more subtle cues and more subtle aspects of the technology.
I just want to say, like, bluntly too. I mean, artificial intelligence is a tool, right? So um, we build tools to help us accomplish something. And so it's very important that we understand what the whole point of all this is: education, formation, spirituality, right? It's to help the person develop, right? It's to ensure they become the person God destined them to be, and so they can worship God and serve others. And so as AI is a tool, it's important to acknowledge that tools can be used for good or bad. Tools can be dangerous, right? And I think I'm just going to say this as a guy building AI. I don't think kids should be interacting with AI. I really don't. I think it can be very, very harmful for them, particularly as it gets increasingly powerful. And I think there's something really profound about kids learning to interact with the natural world, learning to interact with their parents, with friends, looking to friends, looking to parents as sources of information and wisdom, and learning to appreciate that. Having to work really hard to find answers as opposed to just ask Alexa. So these habits that they're forming at a very young age can affect them the rest of their lives. And I really think it's going to become a big problem down the road. So my general feeling is AI shouldn't be in the classrooms. I don't think AI should really be used at home. I think once we don't let people receive communion, right, until they've achieved the age of reason. And I would say AI should be rolled out around the same time. Once we feel that kids have a good foundations and they've properly appreciated all of these things, that may be the time to augment what they already know and the gifts they have with AI. But I think we should be very careful about this process.
Related question to this, I think you already answered, Matthew, is from Sister Nicholas Marie. What are your opinions on the regular use of Gen AI tutors in elementary and high school education by students, and having such feature built into the school digital platform?
Well, I think know where I stand on this one.
Right. Well, so we already answered. Yes.
Well, I have a perhaps slightly different view. To be clear, none of my children all the way to high school use artificial intelligence, and so part of the reason for that is that I don't think that the design modalities have evolved such that they're actually useful for children at this stage. I can imagine design modalities that could be useful in certain contexts for older children in more high school, perhaps, age, when we're getting into Socratic dialogue. I don't see a whole lot of Socratic dialogue out of my 11-year-old quite yet. So I'm kind of swagging it with a finger in the air at high school and definitely undergrad. But even in undergrad, right, kids are still forming their prefrontal lobes, which is a huge hardware concern for good judgment, right? Which is precisely what these tools do a lot of testing on. So at the moment, I don't see design modalities out there for artificial intelligence where having kind of that tutor aspect is super valuable, I think. I think this comes with more problems than it does benefits. That said, I can imagine design modalities where it could be a useful sort of thing, where it does help surface questions that students are asking outside of class time to their peers, to their instructor, to inform kind of a richer dialogue in that sort of let's learn all together and let's understand some of your own learning, specific to you learning challenges that we might be able to frame certain things in different ways, always involving, of course, their human teacher as part of that. And I've seen some glimpses towards modalities in that direction that gives me some hope there. But there's definitely a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah, the issue that worries me is the losing the ability to assess what AI produces. And I'm less worried about our generation because we've developed it, lived in a pre-AI world. It's all relative, right? But I spent first 5 years of my career coding. I was not good at it. I did not enjoy it. I'd much rather solve problems conceptually, right? So I would have enjoyed having an AI support, but I spent the years put in the sweat effort, and later on in my career enabled me really to assess what's produced, right, and have the expertise as a result of it. Now, AI is replacing coding entirely. It's not, I don't know to what extent it will be taught going forward. And the question becomes, the coders now turned prompters, right? What will their ability to differentiate correct from wrong is going to be, and what evidence they are going to rely on, right? So similar story with the children's use of artificial intelligence, right? So interestingly, I mentioned my 17-year-old, right? He has been doing coding prior to AI, kind of learned what to do, and now he is using AI for it and sees the power, but at least he's gone through the human coding effort so he can discriminate the solution of artificial intelligence. Someone who takes it on and just AI does it, right? It's very simple, but the question of quality, I think it's definitely there. Not to mention the process of learning that will be lost, that has a lot of value.
Thank you. And two questions that are related and that are particularly interesting for me because I teach church management. So, Brother John asks, how can AI be welcomed in the parish setting, not just to replace office work, but at the service of building a civilization of love in the church and the world? And a second question from Catherine. As Catholic educators and pastoral ministries, how can we model the responsible use of AI so that it enhances learning, ministry, and human dignity without diminishing critical thinking, authentic relationships, and dependence on God's wisdom? So maybe Matthew, you have an opinion on that because I heard you in some previous webinars.
Yeah. As far as how can, for particularly like Catholic AI, be used to support a parish in its mission, I think in profound ways. But I think it really comes down to, again, it's a tool. So how can this tool be made use of to help solve a problem at a particular parish? And I think one of the problems that's pretty obvious in a lot of the West anyways, our priests are busy, super busy, right? They don't have a lot of time. And so therefore, you don't always have the opportunity to sit down with them and grill them for 2 hours, right? With every, catechetical or moral question you have. Okay. And maybe there isn't enough trained lay catechists, and because I don't really know anyone else, and so on and so on and so on. So what's a way that Catholic AI can? Well, it can give people an opportunity to patiently ask questions and tap into what the doctors and fathers and popes have said. And again, as long as the AI is referencing what human beings have said, God has communicated, through these human beings. I think that can still be very kind of healthy exercise, and it points them back to the original sources, so they can continue that journey, right? Continue asking questions, and I think that's absolutely critical. Certainly, yes, I think AI can be used on the day-to-day drudgery to free the priest up and the lay people who work there, so they have time for more missional things, which I think are ultimately more important. So I would say, like, again, you look at the practical problems, right? The things that are preventing you from achieving your mission as a parish, and I say that not just thinking the priest, but the lay people as well, and just explore. You can ask an AI how can you be helpful in addressing these problems, and I find that can be a very rewarding process, and you may be surprised at what it has to say.
I've been in a couple of conversations too where particularly it's important for us as Catholics to realize that we, over the course of our 2,000 years, has developed the best anti-loneliness mechanism in the history of the world, which is, of course, the parish. It's where we go to get fed, it's where we go to get clean, it's where we go to die. And being able to bring that more into the digital sphere by having online communities or social media or all of these different things wrap in the possibility of going to the parish down the street and having that sort of welcome with open arms in the prodigal son sort of fashion. All of us being prodigal sons at some point in time in our lives. I think it's just a tremendous evangelization opportunity that we have that meets so squarely all of the sadness and concerns of the world writ large. And so I'm very hopeful for the ways in which these tools can be utilized in the unique and just-in-time sort of fashion for bringing people home.
Thank you. So there are many other questions, but we have just 10 minutes left. I wanted just to ask you a last question. So I ask you to be brief, but let's say surgical. So looking ahead, 5 to 10 years, what role do you hope Catholics will play in shaping AI? So what is the big vision? What is the world that we want to build on AI in the future? Mr. Black?
I think the biggest thing that we can do as Catholics for the future of AI is to reimagine and help drive the understanding of the nature of work. I think that we've lost the understanding of the nature of work, perhaps back in the Industrial Revolution era. And there's so much the Catholic social teaching, the Catholic anthropology can bring to our understanding of the nature of work and what's valuable. Not only what's valuable in terms of putting bread on the table, which has, as a result of technology, quite honestly, become a decreasingly important concern for most of the world as a result of innovations that we as a species have made in that score. But we've lost some of the other valuable things. Like it's astonishing to me in some ways that we have to kind of think through what the value of a woman staying home raising her children is from an economic standpoint, right? Like how do we get there, Catholics? How do we turn the economy on its head so that the most valuable possible work anybody could be doing, we have to figure out and scratch our heads like what's the dollars associated with that? So I think there's so much that we can do just in reshaping the individual's understanding of work and what's valuable, reshaping the firm's understanding of work and what's valuable, which of course lends itself to the governmental and economy changes and that need to happen as well. Now that's a huge monumental task, but I think that one of the great things that we have on our side about that is that there's a tremendous number of people who just aren't happy with the way in which work is being done now. And so if we can paint for them an understanding, a real understanding, not this, kind of pie in the sky, everybody should go be a monastic and pray and garden all the time, but this is how like we get there. This is how we work through the hard business model problems, the hard economics problems, the hard, labor problems that are concomitant with this. Uh, we have a lot of the answers in our anthropology somewhere. We have a lot of creativity that has been given to us by God. Let's do this co-creative thing together, and in 5 to 10 years, have a different way in which we are looking at work rather than the 80-hour weeks in front of a blue flickering screen.
Thank you. Dr. Pensina,
So,
what is the big vision?
yes, I think for me the big vision is I'm going back right to Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo, the name Leo. I think the opportunity, like Rerum Novarum being the impetus for a lot of the modern Catholic social teaching in the era of technological revolutions of that time, I'm hoping that this encyclical will be the spark or the beginning of full Catholic social teaching on AI, right? Kind of guiding us into this new era with the right balance of enthusiasm for the good applications and the human agency across the implementation process going forward.
Thank you. Matthew?
I'm one of those people who thinks that there probably won't be a lot of work left after the robots and AGIs are running around, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because when I say there won't be a lot of work, when I'm talking about like the classical work, the punch in, punch out work, the drudgery we do in order to make the money we need in order to survive. I think we are headed to a post scarcity world, as Elon Musk calls it, an era of superabundance. That really excites me, but it also makes me very concerned because people who have a lot of time on their hands, who don't feel a sense of purpose, that could lead to despair. And so I think the thing that gives me hope, and what I hope to see the church contribute, is just be like, man, we have the answer to despair, right? We have the greatest toolkit that's ever been imagined for helping humanity become what they're supposed to be, and to be. And I think the church has a critical and vital role to play in shepherding humanity through this large transition, as it has in the past. So I think it's on us. We just have to make sure that what we know, this precious gift, which is the church and our teaching, and of course the people who are in it, that has to be made known to everyone on earth, and we have to use every tool at our disposal to do it. And I think if we succeed in that, humanity's future will be brighter than it ever has.
Thank you. Bill?
To kind of ride on Taylor's point, one of the topics we take up in our anthropology course for technologists at Catholic International University is leisure, a proper understanding of what leisure is for. We use Joseph Pieper's book and go through his understanding of what leisure is for. Purposeful leisure, I think, just as we have forgotten what work is for, and then we try to minimize it at all costs, we have a failed understanding of what leisure is. We think dissipation is leisure, and some growing evidence on the neuroscientific front is pointing to the fact that dissipative rest does not renew the neural circuits. There's a buildup of adenosine that remains when you don't properly engage in leisure. And this is something that the church teaches, right? It teaches about the day of the Lord. John Paul II wrote a beautiful document, it might have been an apostolic letter, I think, on the day of the Lord and the purpose of leisure. And I think this can help us renew our culture. In fact, Pieper's book, the subpart of it is the basis of culture. And so we have to ask ourselves kind of the reverse question, which is where I don't see a lot of culture, where I see a lot of unrest and incivility, perhaps it's because we've forgotten what leisure is for and how to do it properly.
Thank you. And thank you all for your time and your testimonies. And I want to conclude with the citation that Pope Leo included in the encyclica about the from Tolkien, because the commenting that citation, Pope Leo wrote that the civilization of love will not arise from a single or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small and steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. So I hope that from now on we will be together in this effort, and so to build these visions that you just mentioned. Thank you everyone for your time, for your attention, and I hope to see you soon in other webinars together. Thank you.